Alright, Karina baby, today is May the 18th. You are 5 years, 1 month, and 8 days old. Can you believe it? I can't believe it. So, it is the Nimble Weave. The Nimble Weaver in the 18th. Little spider on a thread, spinning at your sticky web. Silently you wind each strand, weave in a pattern planned. Nimble weaver, hear my sigh, and that work to catch a fly. Nimble weaver. Alright, so Mama's gonna read you a story. The Tale of Pigland Bland. Once upon a time, there was an old pig called Aunt Potatoes. She had 8 of a family, 4 little girl pigs called Crosspatch, Such, Yolk, and Spot, and 4 little boy pigs called Alexander, Pigland Bland, Chin, and Stumpy. Stumpy had an accident to his tail. The 8 little pigs had very fine appetites. Yes, they eat indeed. They do eat, said Aunt Potatoes, looking at her family with pride. Suddenly there were fearful squeals. Alexander had squeezed inside the hops of the pig tuft and stuck. Aunt Potatoes and I dragged him out by his hind legs. Chin was already in disgrace. It was washing day, and he had eaten a piece of soap. And pleasantly in a basket of clean clothes was found another dirty little pig. Tuck. Whichever is this? Groaned Aunt Potatoes. Now all the pig family are pink with black spots, but this pig child was smutty black all over. When it had been popped into the tub, it proved to be yuck. I went into the garden. There I found Crosspatch and Stuck, rooting up carrots. I whipped them myself and led them out by their ears. Crosspatch tried to bite me. Aunt Potatoes, you are a worthy person, but your family is not well brought up. Every one of them has been in mischief except Spot and Pigland Bland. Yes, sighed Miss Aunt Potatoes. And they drink bucketfuls of milk. I shall have to get another cow. Go, little Spot, shall stay at home to do the housework, but the others must go. 4 little boy pigs and 4 little girl pigs are too many altogether. Yes, said Aunt Potatoes. There will be more to eat without them. So Chin and Stuck went. Look at this auntie. She has all of her little piglets, and she's trying to keep them clean and keep them healthy. And they're saying that they're not well brought up. Away in the wheelbarrow, and Stumpy, Yuck, and Crosspatch rode away in a cart, and the other 2 little boy pigs, Pigland Bland and Alexander, went to market. We brushed their coats and curled their tails and washed the little faces and washed them goodbye in the yard. Aunt Potatoes wiped her eyes with a large pocket handkerchief, and she wiped Pigland Bland's nose and shed tears. Then she wiped Alexander's nose and shed tears. Then she passed the handkerchief to Spot. Aunt Potatoes sighed and groaned and addressed those little pigs as follows. Now, Pigland Bland, you must go to market. son Pigland Bland, you must go to market. Take your brother Alexander by the hand. Mind your Sunday clothes, and remember to blow your nose. Aunt Petito's passed round the handkerchief again. Beware of traps. Hen, roast, bacon, and eggs. Always walk upon your hind legs. Pigland Bland, who was a sedate little pig, looked suddenly at his Aunt Petito's, turned to the others. Now, son Alexander, take the hand. Wee, 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 giggled Alexander. Take the hand of your brother, Pigland Bland. You must go to market. Mind. Wee, 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 interrupted Alexander again. You put me out, said Aunt Petito's. Observe signposts and milestones. Do not grumble herringbones. Do not gobble herringbones. And remember, said I impressively, if you once cross the country boundaries, you cannot come back. Alexander, you are not attending. Here are 2 licenses permitting 2 pigs to go to market in Lancashire, attended Alexander, and I had no end of trouble in getting those papers from the policeman. Pigland Bland listened gravely. Alexander was hopelessly valiant. I pinned the papers for safety outside the waistcoat pocket. Aunt Petito gave to each little bundle an 8 conversation peppermints with appropriation. So she's getting them all dressed up to go to market. She's pinning their papers because apparently they need papers to go to market for 2 little pigs so that they don't get arrested, so that they could go to market and then come back. Moral sentiments in screws of paper. Then they started. Pigland Bland and Alexander tooted along, and steadily for a mile, at least Pigland Bland did. Alexander made the road half the length. Again, by skipping from side to side, he danced about and pinched his brother singing. This pig went to market, this pig stayed at home, this pig had a bit of meat. Let's see what they have given us for dinner, Pigland. Pigland Bland and Alexander sat down and untied their bundles. Alexander gobbled up his dinner in no time. He had already eaten all his own peppermints. Give me one of yours, please, Pigland. But I wish to preserve them for emergencies, said Pigland Bland doubtfully. Alexander went into squeals and laughter. Then he pricked Pigland with a pin that has fastened his pig paper. And when Pigland slapped him, he dropped the pin and tried to take the Pigland's pin, and the papers got mixed up. Pigland Bland removed Alexander, but pleasantly they made it up again and trotted away together, singing, Tom, Tom, the pepper's son, stole a pig, and away he run. But all the time that he could play, wee over the hills and far away. When the young sirs stole a pig, where are your licenses? Said the policeman. They had nearly run against him around the corner. Pigland Bland pulled out his paper. Alexander, after fumbling, headed over something scrumpy. 2.5-ounce conversation sweets and 3 farthings. What's this? This ain't a license. Alexander's nose lightened visibly. He had lost it. I had one indeed. I had Mr. Policeman. It's not likely that they let you start without. I am passing the farm. You may walk with me. Can I come back too? Inquired Pigland Bland. I see no reason, young sir. Your paper is all right. Pigland Bland did not like going on alone, and it was beginning to rain, but it was unwise to argue with the police. He gave his brother a peppermint and watched him out of sight. To continue the adventure of Alexander, the policeman stirred up the house about tea. about tea time, followed by a damp, subdued little pig. I disposed of Alexander in the neighborhood. He had fairly well when he had settled down. Pigland went on alone, dejectedly. He came to a crossroads and a signpost to Market Town. 5 miles over the hill, 4 miles to Petito's farm, 3 miles. Pigland was shocked. There was little hope of sleeping in Market Town, and tomorrow was the hiring fair. It was deplorable to think how much time had been. Alright, so one of the little piggies lost their papers, so one of them had to go alone. Another one went with the police officer. Wasted time by a favoritee of Alexander. He glanced wishfully along the road towards the hills and then set off, walking observantly to the other way, buttoning up his coat against the rain, but he never wanted to go, and the idea of standing all by himself in the crowded market to be stared at, pushed, and hired by some big strange farmer was very disagreeable. "I wish I could have a little garden and grow potatoes," said Pigland. He put his cold hand in his pocket and he felt his paper. He put his other hand in his other pocket and felt another paper. Alexander's! Pigland squealed. Then he ran back frantically, hoping to overtake Alexander and the policeman. He took a wrong turn, several wrong turns, and was quite lost. It grew dark and the wind whistled, and the trees cracked and groaned. Pigland became frightened. He cried, "Wee, wee, wee! I can't find my way home!" After an hour's wandering, he got out of the wood. The moon shone through the clouds, and Pigland saw a country that was new to him. The road crossed a moor. Below was a wide valley and a river twinkling in the moonlight, and beyond it, misty distance, lay the hills. He saw a small wooden hut, made his way to it, and crept inside. "I am afraid it is a hen house, but what can I do?" said Pigland, wet and cold and quite tired out. Bacon and eggs, clucked a hen on a perch. "Trip, trip, trip, cluck, cluck, cluck," scolded the disturbed cardinal. To market, jingly jig," clucked a broody white hen roasted next to him. Pigland, much alarmed, determined to leave at daybreak. In the meantime, he and the hens fell asleep. In less than an hour they were all awake. The owner, Mr. Peter Thomas Pepperson, came with a lantern and a hamper to watch 6 fowls to make it to market in the morning. He grabbed the white hen roosting next to the cock. Then his eye fell upon Pigland, squeezed up in a corner. He made a similar remark. "Hello, here's another," seized Pigland by the scoff of the neck and dropped him into the hamper. Then he dropped in 5 more dirty, clucking hens. Upon the top of Pigland Land, the hamper contained 6 fowls and a young pig with no light weight. It was taken downhill unsteadily with jerks. Pigland, although nearly scratched to pieces, contrived to hide the papers and peppermints inside his clothes. At least the hamper was bumping. Alright, so Pigland found a farm to stay on overnight, and he went into the hen house. He fell asleep. Look at him hiding. He hid and fell asleep in the hen house. And then the farmer came in with the lantern and saw him, so he's taken him to market. That's where he needs to go. Down upon the kitchen floor, the lid was open, and Pigland was lifted out. He looked up, blinking, and saw an offensively ugly elderly man grinning from ear to ear. This one's come of himself. Whatever Mr. Pepperson, turning Pigland's pockets inside out, he pushed the hamper into a corner, threw a sack over to keep the hens quiet, and put a pot on the fire, and unlaced his boots. Pigland Bland drew forward a croppy stool and sat on the edge of the shyly warming his hands. Mr. Pepperson pulled off the boots and threw it again, the waistcoat and the farther end of the kitchen. There was a smothering noise. Shut up, said Mr. Pepperson. Pigland Bland, warming his hands, and eyed him. Mr. Pepperson pulled off the other boot and flung it after the first. There was again a curious noise. Be quiet, will ye, said Mr. Pepperson. Pigland Bland sat on the very edge of the coffee stool. Mr. Pepperson fetched meat from a chest and made porridge. It seemed to Pigland Bland that something at the further end of the kitchen was taking a suppressed interest in the cooking, but he was too hungry to be troubled by noises. Mr. Pepperson poured out 3 platefuls for himself and Pigland, and a third after glaring at Pigland, he put away with much scoffing, and locked up. Pigland Bland ate his supper discreetly. After supper, Mr. Pepperson consulted an alarmic and felt Pigland's ribs. He was too late in the season for curing bacon, and he glutted his meals. Besides, the hens had seen this pig. He looked at the small remains of the flesh side of bacon, and then he looked unsteadily at Pigland. You may sleep on the rug, said Mr. Peter Thomas Pepperson. Pigland Bland slept like a top. In the morning, Mr. Pepperson made more porridge. The weather was warmer. He looked how much meal was left in the chest and seemed dissatisfied. You'll likely be moving on again, said he to Pigland Bland. Before Pigland could reply, a neighbor who was giving Mr. Pepperson the hens a lift whistled from the gate. Mr. Pepperson hurried out, and the hamper, enjoying Pigland's to shut the door behind him and not meddle with naught, or I'll come back and skin ye, said Mr. Pepperson. It crossed Pigland's mind that if he had asked for a lift too, he might still have been in time for the market. But he distrusted Peter Thomas. After finishing breakfast at his leisure, Pigland had a look around the cottage. Everything was locked up. He found some potato peelings in a basket in the back kitchen. Pigland ate the peel and washed up the porridge plates in the bucket. He sang while he worked. Tom with his pipe made such a noise, he called up at the girls and boys, and they all ran to hear him play, over the hills and far away. Suddenly a little smothered voice chimed in, over the hills a great way off, the wind shall blow my top knot off. Who do you think is singing? Let's find out. Pigland Bland put down the plate which he was wiping and listened. After a long pause, Pigland went on tiptoe and peeped around the door into the front kitchen. There was nobody there. After another pause, Pigland approached the door of the locked cupboard and sniffed at the keyhole. It was quiet. It was quite quiet. After another long pause, Pigland pushed a peppermint under the door. It was sucked in immediately. In the course of the day, Pigland pushed in all his remaining 6 peppermints. When Mr. Pepperson returned, he found Pigland sitting before the fire. He was brushed up the hearth and put on a pot to boil. The meal was not got at Abel. Mr. Pepperson was very affordable. He's affordable. He slapped Pigland on the back, made lots of porridge, and forgot to lock the meal chest. He did lock the cupboard door, but without properly shutting it. He went to bed early and told Pigland upon no account to disturb him the next day before 12 o'clock. Pigland Land sat by the fire eating his supper. All at once, at his elbow, a little voice spoke. "My name is Pigwig. Make me more porridge, please." Pigland Land jumped and looked around. A perfectly lovely little black Berkshire pig stood smiling beside him. She was twiddly little screwed up eyes, a double chin, and a short turned up nose. She pointed at Pigland's plate. He hastily gave it to her and fled to the meal chest. "How did you come here?" asked Pigland Bland. "Stolen," replied Pigwig, with her mouth full. Pigland helped himself to meal without scruple. "What for?" "Bacon, hams," replied Pigwig carefully. "Why on earth did you run away?" explained the horrified Pigland. I shall after supper," said Pigland discreetly. Pigland Land made more porridge and watched her shyly. She finished a second plate, got up, and looked about her, as though she were going to start. "You can't go in the dark," said Pigland Land. Pigland looked anxiously. "Do you know your way by daylight?" "I know we can see this little white house from the hills across the river." "Which way are you going, Mr. Pig?" "To market. I have two big papers. I might take you to the bridge if you have no objection." All right. Pigland must confess Pigland much confessed and sitting on the edge of a coffee stool. Pigwig's gratitude was such that she asked so many questions it would become embarrassing to Pigland Land. He was obliged to shut his eyes and pretend to sleep and become quiet, and there was still a peppermint. "I thought you had eaten them," said Pigland, waking suddenly. "Only the corners," replied Pigwig. Suddenly the sediment with much interest by the firelight. "I wish you wouldn't. He might smell them through the ceiling," said the alarmed Pigland. Pigwig put back the sticky peppermint into her pocket. "Sing something," she demanded. "I am sorry, I have a toothache," said Pigland, much dismayed. "Then I will sing," replied Pigwig. "You will not mind if I say itty tiddly. I have forgotten some of the words." Pigland Land made no objection. He sat with his eyes half shut and watched her. She wedged her hand in her pocket about clapping time and singing in a sweet little gritty voice. "A funny old mother pig lived in a sty, and 3 little pigs had she. Tiddly, iddly, itty biddly, uggy, ugg, ugg, ugg." And the little pig said, "Wee, wee, wee." She sang successfully through 3 or 4 verses. Only at verse her head nodded a little lower, and the little twinkly eyes closed up. "Those 3 little pigs grew peaky and lean and lean. They might very well be 4. Somehow they couldn't say ugh, ugh, ugh. And they wanna say, wee, for someone who couldn't say. Piggy Wiggy's head bobbed lower and lower until she rolled over a little round ball, fast asleep on the hearthrug. Pigland Bland, on tiptoed covered her up with an antipcoaster. He was afraid to go to sleep himself. For the rest of the night he sat listening to the chirping of the crickets and the snores of Mr. Piperson overhead. Early in the morning, between dark and daylight, Pigland tied up a little bundle and woke up Pigwig. She was excited and half frightened. But it's dark. How can we find our way? The cock has crowed. We must start before the hens come out. They might shout to Mr. Pepperson. Pigwig sat down again and commenced to cry. So she got scared and she started crying. There's Pigwig. Come away, Pigwig. We can see when we get used to it. Come, I can hear the crackling. Pigland had never said shh to a hen in his life, being peaceable, as he remembered the hamper. He opened the house door quietly and shut it after them. There was no garden. The neighborhood of Mr. Pepperson was all scrunched up by fowls. They slipped away, hand in hand, across the untidy field to the road. The sun rose while they were crossing the moor, a dazzling light over the tops of the hills. The sunshine crept down to the slopes, into the peaceful garden valleys, where little white cottages nestled in gardens and orchards. That's Westmoreland, said Pigwig. She dropped Pigland's hand and commenced to dance, singing, Tom, Tom, the paper's son, stole a pig, and away he ran. But all the tune that he could play was over the hills and far away. Come, Pigwig, we must go to the bridge before folks are stirring. Why do you want to go to market, Pigland? Inquired Pigwig. Presently I don't want to. I want to grow potatoes. Have a peppermint, said Pigwig. Pigland Bland refused quite crossly. Does your poor toothy hurt? Inquired Pigwig. Pigland Bland grinned. Pigwig ate the peppermint herself and followed the opposite side of the road. Pigwig kept under the wall. There's a man plunging. Pigwig crossed over. They hurried down the hill towards the county boundary. Suddenly, Pigland stopped. He heard wheels. Suddenly, jiggling up the road below them was a tradesman cart. The reins flipped on the horseback. The grocer was reading the newspaper. Take the peppermint out of your mouth, Pigwig, and we may have to run. Don't say one word, leave it to me, and in sight of the bridge, said poor Pigland, nearly crying. He began to walk frightfully lame, holding Pigwig's arm. The grocer, intent up his papers, might have passed them, if the horse had not shelled a snort. He pulled the cart, crossing, and held down his whip. Hello! Where are you going to? Pigland Bland stared at him vacantly. Are you deaf? Are you going to market? Pigland nodded slowly. I thought as much. It was yesterday. Show me your license. Pigland started at the offhand hoe. Pigland stared at the offhand hoe of the grocer's horses, which had picked up a stone. The grocer flocked his whip papers, pig license. Pigland fumbled in all his pockets and handed up the papers to the grocer. Read them, but still seemed dissatisfied. There here pigs is a young lady. Is her name Alexander? Pigwig opened her mouth and shut it again. Pigland coughed asthmatically. The grocer ran his fingers down the advertisement claim of his newspaper. Lost, stolen, or starred rewards. He looked suspiciously at Pigwig. Then he stood up in the trip and whipped for the plagueman. You wait here while I drive on to speak to him, said the grocer, gathering up the reins. He knew that pigs are slippery, but surely such a very lame pig could never run. Not yet, Pigwig. He will look back. The grocer did so. He saw the two pigs stuck still in the middle of the road. Then he looked over his horse heels. It was lame also. The stone took some time to knock out. After he got to the plowman, now Pigwig, now, and Pigland Bland. Never did any pigs run as those pigs ran. They raced and squealed and pelted down the long white hill towards the bridge. Little fat Pigwig petticoats fluttered, and her feet went pitter-patter, as she bounced and jumped. They ran and they ran and they ran down the hill and across a short cut on level green turf at the bottom, between pebbles and beds and russets. They came to a river, they came to a bridge, and they crossed it hand in hand. And over the hills and far away she danced with Pigland Bland. Look at that, they had an adventure. So, they got away. Alright. Karina, baby, Mama loves you. Mama will always love you. Alright? I love you, baby.